communicating the E in your utilities ESG journey. I understand we have some new attendees, some first timers here. Welcome. I hope this material helps you in your work. And if you would like to join our subscriber list, we have a monthly blog on marketing and communications for utilities. You can go to our website there at the bottom of the screen, find it easily enough, and subscribe to our blog. We'd love to have you join us. So before we get started, just a touch about EEC, Egan Energy Communications, for those of you who are with us for the first time. Briefly put, we are a content creation firm for utilities. We write all manner of things that are used in marketing and communications for utilities, whether it's employee newsletters, ghosted trade journal articles, and so on. So more about that again, if you wish to check out the EEC website. So before we get into the content today, I did want to talk a little bit about the title, and it's a bit of a mouthful. We originally were hoping to do a webcast covering all aspects of ESG, which, if this is your first time through the chute, that's environmental, social, and governance, which is a large and increasingly almost unwieldy collection of criteria that investors and credit rating agencies are using to assess your risks. Well, it turns out that that would be about an 8-hour webcast, and I didn't know that anyone was really up for that. So we decided to trim our sails and just focus on the E in ESG, the environmental journey, because certainly utilities are on that journey. So if there's a question about why ESG and why now, I think the short answer is money and a lot of it. On this chart on the left, you'll see that the assets under management have been placed in responsible or sustainable or ESG funds, variously defined, has risen basically fourfold in the last decade. It's up at $100 trillion, trillion with a T. That's about 4 times the size of the entire US economy. And last week, when the UN conference in Glasgow was winding down, another 130 trillion was thrown onto the table by investors, insurance companies, and banks. So this chart is a year old. So expect us to go considerably above $100 trillion. Credit rating agencies are also getting into the mix. Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch, they exist to assess your risks. And as energy companies involved in a hydrocarbon business, your risks by and large are substantial. So credit rating agencies are getting into the mix. And increasingly, customers, employees, and other stakeholders, even potential employees, are asking some questions about your ESG policies. So I think it's not fair at all to say this is some kind of academic discussion. In fact, this really is a critical discussion for companies in your industry. So ESG is big and getting bigger, and that means environmental communications, the E portion of ESG, is going to be getting more and more important. And that's why we're so glad to have our 2 speakers here with us today. Pam Butler is going to lead us off. She's from Xcel Energy, one of the largest and greenest utilities in the country. She is their manager of sustainability and ESG communications, and she's been hard at it for well over a decade. And she'll be followed by Matt Wald, a friend and former New York Times energy reporter, as well as a spokesperson for the Nuclear Energy Institute. And Matt is going to tell us some inconvenient and uncomfortable truths about the energy transition and ESG. Before we kick it off, just a couple of housekeeping notes. As you see, we will record this and we will share this webcast. I urge you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send us questions. Please send them as you think of them. Don't wait until the end. We do have 2 polls. We're going to ask you basically a chance for each of us to understand where each of us are in our ESG journey. And then at the end, we have a survey where we're going to ask you to tell us what topics you would like us to tackle in future webcasts. And so here's the first poll right now. It concerns the number of ESG reports your utility has produced. And if it's environmental reports or sustainability reports or community action reports, anything involving the environment. And so we have a radio button there. Please let us know where you are in your process, and then click submit, and then we'll be able to display those results in just a minute. Again, this is really just a chance for us to better understand where each of us are. Okay, we're going to be closing the poll now. I think we've got a couple of text responses as well. Let's see. Okay, so we've got 13% roughly that said we're in the process of preparing our first report, and another 13 that said we have not prepared any ESG reports. Almost half of the attendees say we've produced 2 or 3 reports, and there is a segment that says that they have no plans to produce an environmental sustainability governance report. So it's an interesting distribution, and we do have about 25% of listeners who have produced 3 or more reports. So thank you, panelists, or thank you, attendees, for telling us where you are. With that, I'm going to turn the wheel over to Pam Butler. Pam?
Thank you, John. I think you can all see my screen here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm going to share with you Xcel Energy's ESG journey. And as John mentions, the focus on the E, most of our communications are around environment because it is a large portion of our business, impacts our business. So we really do focus on E, but I find that the S is growing too. And over the last couple of years, we've definitely received more interest in the social part of our business. So as John mentioned, we've been at this for a long time. And back in 2005, we published our first environmental social governance report. It was called the Triple Bottom Line Report. And it was a single 39-page printed report. It needed to be mailed or distributed, by hand to get to the audience. The content was very general. We followed no real standards or guidelines. We, included what we wanted to include or what we thought people wanted to see. And it was very much one size fits all when it came to how we looked at the audience for it. Today our reporting is far more complex, that it's all online. We try to make it as easily accessible as possible. If you roll the whole report up all together, it's over 150 pages. We try to highlight stories and different information nuggets to make it more interesting for people. And we do follow multiple standards and guidelines. Our reporting follows the Global Reporting Initiative standards, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board standards, and we've published a special report to respond to the interests of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financials Disclosures. It's all kind of a mouthful. When you get into ESG world, everything has an acronym and it's a lot of alphabet soup. But so we follow kind of the main standards that are out there, and a lot of that's driven by our investors and the other key audiences that want to see us meet those standards. And we have lots of different audiences for the report today that all have kind of different needs and interests. And our report's also very data driven and very data oriented. So with that, I'll just put this as a backdrop that you may have remember Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire, that we live in a cynical world, and indeed we do. I think for a long time, companies there's been skepticism among the general public around big business and corporate America. But over the last couple of years, there's been an increase in that, I would say. that we've seen more headlines or more reports related to corporations and their net zero carbon reduction goals. That can they really achieve those goals? What kind of accounting is behind those goals? In the just last week, the climate conference in Glasgow ended, and during that there was a large protest around corporate greenwashing or organizational greenwashing. So we're seeing more of that, and I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And you know, one other thing I'd add is JD Power puts out a sustainability index. They've done that for the last couple of years. And in their index, they found this past year that only 46% of utility customers actually believe their utilities can meet their net zero goals. So there's skepticism out there, and it's definitely, I think, growing. So, you know, with that, one of the main objectives around our environmental social governance communications is building trust and confidence with our different audiences. And I think using three things to really accomplish that. One is transparency, and you know, providing information and being open about our policies and practices. Another is accuracy. As I mentioned, you know, we provide a lot of data, and it's very important that our data is accurate. And over the last few years, we've really tightened down and, you know, put in place more procedure around the data that we have and that we use to make sure it's accurate. And then finally, the delivery, and I'll talk about that a little later, but, you know, how do we deliver information to our audiences so that we can help build that trust and confidence. So in working with our reporting, I often get asked, you know, who's the audience? You know, who reads your report, who looks at it? And I would say our audience is just about everyone. But I can divide them into two clear groups. One group is an audience that's seeking information. And we hear from this different audience probably every day with a different question, a different request. And that includes our investors, third-party analysts who rate or rank our environmental social governance. We have large customers who use our reporting for their own sustainability reporting. We have our, you know, environmental NGOs and our watchdogs that are out there. And then we also have our own employees, our external facing employees, maybe they're community managers, account managers, who receive questions from our local stakeholders that are looking for our information to be able to respond to their stakeholders. So that's the first group. And then the second group of audience, they're the group that we want to receive our information, that we want to inform them, we want to raise their awareness. It's part of building customer satisfaction or loyalty for us to share our information with this particular audience. So that's at a more local level. It's our customers, our community leaders, elected officials, our regulators, media and reporters, and then all our employees who, you know, we'd like to act as ambassadors on our behalf. So when you look at that first audience and the information they're seeking, it's a wide variety of things, and it's really mushroomed again over the last couple of years. And they are looking for things such as, you know, we have carbon reduction goals. They want to see the policy and the strategy that's behind those carbon reduction goals. So we've published special reports on that. They're looking for our sustainability report. They want to know about our political contributions. And then deeper than that, they want to know what kind of policies we have. Do we have a corporate environmental policy? Do we have a policy around lobbying and contributions? They want to see our code of conduct. So this audience, they're really seeking a lot of different audiences, or I'm sorry, a lot of different publications and information from us. And I'll just show you here one way that we've worked to manage those requests. So this is our sustainability report. And we've carved out an area of our sustainability report that we call our ESG library. It's a place where that audience can go and find all those different documents. It's been a productivity type of measure for us in that it's a, it's a one-stop shop where people can go and get this information. They can find our full sustainability report. They can find all of our past reports going back to that 2005 reports. They can find our Global Reporting Initiative Index or our SASB Index. They can dig deeper and find our carbon report that we've published. We've published a report on green bonds. So just about all the information that we make public related to ESG is in this one spot on our website. So we'll move on to the second audience. And this is, again, the audience we want to inform. We want them to have our information. So we reach out to them in a number of ways, and we try to do it in kind of enticing, interesting, types of social media posts. We have customer emails that we provide. We use video clips and graphics and try to entice this audience to dig deeper into our information. And the information we provide is really provided in layers. So, first trying to pull them in with interesting posts, and then we might take them to stories or highlights that we have that give them a little more information, but encourage them to dig deeper if they want to. And I'll show you in a minute, but our reporting is made up of different briefs on different subjects. So they can dig into those briefs and they can go deeper into our reporting. And if they're really interested, they can find our data. So kind of using this layered approach, we've recently done some research with our customers to find out more about, and specifically research around our net zero goals. And what we've found with our customers, they're glad we have goals. They want to see our goals, but they do want to dig down deeper, or at least they say they do, and they want to find our reporting and know that we have plans and what kind of progress we're making. So this layered approach, I think, helps them dig down and find that information if they truly want to see it. So I'll show you now I'll take you on a little tour of our sustainability report so you can see how it's organized. So when you go to our report, you will see, you start off where we offer you up some highlights at the very top. And if you click on our highlights, you get a document that takes you at a really high level, those environmental, social things that are important to our company and important to our stakeholders. And we walk through, how we're performing on those things. And we try to do it in a very visual, very concise way to let people know, what our energy mix looks like, or what are our goals around natural gas. How are we doing? We have an EV goal. How are we doing on our EV goal? So walking through the progress that we're making as a company at a very high level visual way. And then if people want to go further, they can find our stories. And what we've started doing is with our corporate blog, bringing in our blog stories and trying to rotate them throughout the year. So this stays fresh. It helps promote our blog, but it also helps, people who come to our reporting website learn a little bit more in a more interesting way about what our company is doing. We have the message from the CEO, and then you can go down further to explore the report. And I mentioned the briefs earlier. So our report, we've done research to find out what kind of issues our audience is interested in when it comes to ESG. And we've divided those issues into 21 different briefs. And if you compiled all those briefs together, they make up our full report. But the briefs can be used as standalone documents. So, and they're divided by environmental, social, and governance topics. And so you can see here the different topics we offer: renewable energy, leading the clean energy transition, wildlife and habitat protection. And one of the roles that these briefs can play is, like I mentioned, we have external facing employees that deal with our stakeholders every day. Say we have a community manager who's out at a city council meeting and somebody wants to know, how do we manage water? Do we have goals around water use? Are we reducing our water use? Well, that manager can then take that particular stakeholder to our brief on managing water use and find everything you might want to know about how we manage water use, how, what kind of corporate governance we have around it, the highlights, our goal, how we're performing against our goal, and, describes how we use water and the things we're doing to reduce that water use. So again, we have briefs on 21 different topics that people can dig down and find, the topic that might interest them and learn more in that brief. And then what I showed you earlier was this ESG document library, that anything you might want to know about our policies or positions, different reporting that we have, it's all available in that ESG library. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, it's a lot of information, and how do we deliver it in a way, again, that I think focuses on that trust element and trying to build trust and confidence with the different audiences that we have. And I think being a utility, we are very fortunate to operate in communities. We're embedded in our communities, and have people on the ground who build relationships with our community leaders, with our regulators and our large customers. So we rely a lot on our external facing employees to help share the reporting that we have, to help share information. And often, we'll have announcements every year when we roll out a report, when we roll out our carbon reduction progress that we're making. Just recently, we rolled out goals for our natural gas business. And so as part of that rollout, we provided a briefing to our external facing employees to share the new goal with them. And then we provided an email that we call Need to Know that provides a full array of communication tools that those employees can use in working with their stakeholders. They get an email template that they can share. They get messaging, they get an FAQ, PowerPoint slides, video, they get it all, and then they can turn around and use that with their stakeholders. Additionally, for all employees, we've started a program, our social energy program, where employees can go through a training, and then they are kind of free to share our social posts that we provide on different topics with their friends, family, and followers. So again, using those trusted relationships to help get this information out. Finally, I'll just leave you with my contact information, because this is a journey. I don't think it's going away. I think we're going to be working on ESG for a long time, and it continues to evolve and to grow and change. So I'm interested in your journey, and if you'd like to contact me, I'm very open to that. So turn it back to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And just two things I wanted to note. I love the way you decided we're going to sequence this information and go for the heart first, then the head, in terms of stories first, then data. And then also the way that you're trying to use your existing network of stakeholders in the community to disseminate this. Your journey talks about how we went from 39 pages, one report printed, to now 100 and some odd pages. Love the way you guys are bite-sizing it and targeting your information. So I think there's a lot there for those interested in the journey. Now, before we go to our second poll and Matt, we did get a question, Pam, and I think has your name on it. How can you effectively cater to quote unquote special interest groups while keeping the best interest of the quote unquote average customer in mind? Pam, you want to take a swing at that?
Sure, I will. And I'll say two things about that. First, I showed you how we layer the information, how we have that ESG document library. And that library is really intended for that kind of advocate audience where they can find the information they're looking for, try to be very transparent. But I would also say, that some of our customers, we can't discount our customers and other parts of our audience within our communities. They're looking for that same information. They want to see that backup material that we have. They like that we have goals. They like that, we publish the progress around our goals, but they want to go a little bit deeper and see some details behind it.
So by creating that one-stop shop of 20 some odd targeted resources, you let people pick and choose and don't force them to read the whole 125 pages or whatever. Okay, so excellent, great. Thank you so much, Pam. We're going to go to Matt in just a moment, but first we have our second poll, and that is, tell us about the obstacles that you have encountered as you try to develop or have developed your ESG reports. So this one has a lot of potential obstacles. So I would want you to make sure you use the slider bar and go down and look at all of the options. But we're assuming that this is still an uphill sell for many utilities. And so we wanted to test that assumption and see. So please click as many of the radio buttons as are appropriate and let us know where you stand in terms of your level of support or lack thereof within your organization for producing this report, which is kind of out of the box for our industry, generally speaking. I think we've got maybe another 15, 20 seconds, and then we'll report out, and then we'll go to Matt. This may be one of those polls that may not equal 100 because some people may have numerous obstacles and some people have none. So I'm eager to see where you are. We're going to be closing the poll now. And here come the results. Okay, so there's almost 20% of you said, why would our stakeholders care? We're not seeing a perceived need here. A similar number said getting and keeping the attention of executive level management. So that's 1 in 5 said one of those two answers. Almost half of you said it's a question of resources. We're stretched really thin. Some said we're a distribution utility. We don't have any generation, so who would care? One attendee said we're an integrated utility, but we haven't done very much. So I guess that's like inertia. Also, there's one member who said there apparently is some lack of interest or resistance among mid or subject matter experts. Here's a perennial one. Roughly a quarter of you said we have difficulty rendering complicated technical issues into easily understood words and art. And then a similar number said we have experienced some caution from the board who worry that this topic might be a little bit political. And we know that that's typically an uncomfortable area for utilities to journey. Well, anyway, if you're one of the ones who said we're having a resource issue, I invite you to contact me and maybe I could help you with that. But let me now turn over to Matt Wald, who I did not say at the beginning, but Matt, as a former New York Times reporter, former spokesperson for the Nuclear Energy Institute, now finds a lot of time on his hands, and he may or may not be writing a book. So if we have anyone in the audience who has a brother, sister, cousin, father, wife in the publishing business, I urge you to contact Matt Wald. You will not find a more authoritative voice on energy. Matt, take it away.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope there's not too much background noise. Somebody was with a chainsaw appeared to have been doing some vegetation management outside my window here. I'm going to talk about two related topics. The E portion of the utilities ESG. We use these letters so much we forget what they stand for: environmental, social, and governance. I'm going to talk about how we should understand the role of nuclear energy in our electric system and how to talk about that role to a skeptical public. The bottom line is that if you have nuclear reactors or you plan to add them, get more comfortable and more active in communicating about nuclear energy. Some may shy away from this, thinking nuclear is the third rail, touch it and you die. I assure you this is not the case. Discussing nuclear with a clear and forthright manner builds credibility. So about nuclear's role, I'm going to share my screen here. I was instructed the way to do this is just to push buttons until something happens. So about nuclear's role, we can't assume that an innumerate public understands where we're starting from. Our nation's electric system is still about 60% fossil. The carbon-free part is just 40%, except that nobody expects a big jump in the second largest carbon-free part, hydro. And some of the stuff that we today count as carbon-free, like biomass, probably won't pass muster by mid-century. Everybody loves solar and wind, but together they're only about 11% of energy generation, and they're already running into not in my backyard barriers and into integration problems. Nuclear remains the largest, here we go. The largest source of carbon-free generation, although its production peaked about 3 years ago and is in slight decline. It's likely to pick up again at the end of this decade. The second major point is that utilities definitely have the E of ESG on their minds. This chart was put together by my former employer, the Nuclear Energy Institute. It's a compilation of all the utility pledges to cut emissions. Bear in mind that while they've made those pledges, they haven't shared publicly how they're going to get there. This is a 30-year campaign, and I think the reason is simple: they don't know. By the way, these utilities serve more than half the load in the United States. And if we electrify a lot of the things that today run on fossil fuels, gasoline and diesel in cars and trucks, natural gas for heating our homes, offices and stores, natural gas and coal in industry, our electricity system may end up having to double or triple by 2050. So the carbon-free part will have to increase by a factor of 5 to 8. My scan of the market tells me very few utilities are sharing that kind of math with their customers. Excuse me. Many are adding wind and solar, but as California is discovering, that gets harder as the intermittent sources make up a larger portion of the system. You have to build so much capacity to meet your needs at times of low wind or low sun that you end up with lots of surpluses at other times. It's not the most efficient path. We need energy that's carbon-free and dispatchable, meaning you can choose when to make it. Guess what? That's nuclear. One of our industry's current trends is towards smaller modular reactors that can be built in a factory and shipped to where they're needed. The whole reactor would be in a handful of parts. This particular one is an illustration from NuScale, which is likely to be one of the first small modular reactors to be commercialized. Factory production is higher in quality, and if you can build the reactor at the same time you're building the civil infrastructure, you can cut deployment time sharply. One of the benefits of advanced designs is that you can vary the output on a time scale of seconds or minutes or hours or months. This makes it an excellent dance partner for wind and sun. If you like ballroom dancing, then in this case, the wind and sun will lead and the reactor will follow, and customers won't see the lights flicker. Flexible nuclear is an essential complement to a zero carbon system. One environmental message is that if you like solar and wind, you've got to love nuclear. This particular one is a thermal storage system, and I believe the company announced yesterday a location to build it at the site of a former coal plant in Wyoming. So how do you effectively talk about nuclear? What are the message points people respond to favorably? Nuclear is often left out of the conversation. People talk about renewables when they mean clean, but they don't say clean. Even when they do talk about clean, they don't think of nuclear. When you have the opportunity to talk about nuclear, call it carbon-free energy and clean air energy, always on, reliable. People are worried about the climate, but they more favorably react to a discussion of climate than of climate change. The term climate change can set off political alarm bells. Most people don't feel that they're very well informed about nuclear, and public opinion polling by NEI and others says that most are open to it. The effective language is customer-friendly, intuitive, and not technology-specific. There are some whiz-bang new reactor technologies coming to market, but most of the public doesn't want the details. The best message is that wind and solar are good, but they can't do the job alone. We need a partnership that includes nuclear. Don't position nuclear as an alternative to wind and solar. Position it as a replacement for carbon and a complement to the wind and solar that's available 24/7, 365 days. Wind and solar get us partway there. We need a partnership. Volunteering it's safe is not a good strategy. Would you go to a restaurant that had a sign in the window that said, now celebrating our third rat-free month? It's just not an effective strategy. Saying we're highly regulated isn't reassuring the public either, nor is minimizing the health importance of radiation exposure. There's continuous scientific debate about whether low-level exposure means anything, but don't go there. We can take some instruction from the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, UAMPS, which wants to build a cluster of NuScale modules at the Idaho National Laboratory. UAMPS is in a deep red part of the country, Utah and surrounding states. There's no consensus among its customers about climate change. And there's no fear whatsoever in the Intermountain West that sea level is rising. UAMPS is pushing the idea that it's worried about changing government regulation of power plant emissions, that it's trying to get ahead of the curve. In other words, the issue isn't climate change, it's climate change regulation. And their plan for the NuScale plant has an air-cooled cooling tower, meaning that it uses virtually no water, an important feature in the increasing arid Intermountain West. I should add that there are some pitfalls for utilities promoting the E in their ESG credentials. One is getting out of coal. If you're doing that by selling the coal plant to somebody else, to use a technical term, that don't count. The machine is still running, it's just that it has a new owner. Another is building new fossil-fired generation to replace coal. Nobody's really sure what the true climate footprint of gas is because there are conflicting accounts of how much methane leaks unburned. And after that, there are two different ways of counting the climate effects of unburned methane, short-term and long-term. But building a 30-year combined cycle gas plant now locks you into 30 years of carbon emissions. Maybe not as bad as coal, but this is not the path to zero. A good reporter or serious climate activist will also ask what you're doing about making a zero carbon electric supply match the energy demand. Honesty might help here. You might need to say that you're counting on some combination of batteries that hasn't been invented yet, carbon capture that hasn't been invented yet, or at least commercialized, and advanced nuclear that hasn't been demonstrated yet. In the meantime, our current fleet is running like clockwork. These are the results for the recent statistics for their full calendar year. When we're talking about the current nuclear fleet, it's helpful to say we have multiple layers of protection, that safety systems sense problems before they occur, and that the plants automatically turn themselves off when needed. We've lost reactors over the years, but we still had a record amount of electricity generated in 2020 because each reactor is more productive. They used to run 60 or 70% of the hours in a year. Now they run more than 90%. So we're making an amount of electricity with 90 some odd plants that would have required about 125 plants in the 1980s. When talking about the path to net zero carbon emissions, it's a good idea to remind the audience that when you displace coal, you displace other emissions that include soot and mercury, nitrogen oxides, as well as carbon dioxide. When you displace natural gas, you replace carbon dioxide, about 60% as much as coal, plus nitrogen oxides. I don't know if we'll reach consensus on the definition of ESG or environmental justice. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has been holding sessions on this subject, some of which have simply become a new venue for anti-nukes to make the same arguments. The Commission staff is going to submit recommendations to the Commission in February. NEI, my former employer, just told the Commission that the proper vehicle is the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. If that happens, ESG and environmental justice aren't going to be a big deal. Excuse me. It's still allergy season here. Aren't going to be a big deal for the NRC. I predict that environmental justice and ESG will become a bigger issue in two fields that are adjacent to generating energy. That is transmission and also mining, because building a zero carbon generating infrastructure is going to require a lot of mining around the world. If you're interested in ESG, stick with it. It'll be a growth industry. I also note with some amusement that Bitcoin mining is turning to nuclear to improve its ESG credentials. Talon and Energy Harbor have deals to use the reactors to supply Bitcoin mines. Oklo has an MOU with another Bitcoin company. And remember, when you communicate with customers on an unfamiliar topic or unwind assumptions, you need to exercise message discipline and repeat the message numerous times. To the extent that most people think about electricity, they probably think solar and wind will take care of the world's carbon problem. It won't. And the utilities should not allow that false assumption to go unchecked. And if I could turn off screen sharing, I'd be smarter than I am. Here we go. Stop share. Thank you.
Matt, thank you for a terrific talk. As I said, inconvenient and uncomfortable truths around this issue of your environmental journey. Now, we have received a couple of questions from the audience. We encourage the audience to continue sending them in, but Matt, one's come in with your name on it. And again, thank you to the audience for sending the questions and as well the panelists. Matt, talk about some of the simpler ways to educate and explain about carbon neutrality and the move to electrify everything.
The simpler way is you can make electricity from a carbon source or a non-carbon source. Once you produce the gallon of gasoline or diesel, once you're burning natural gas in a factory or coal in a factory, that's not going to get captured. You could conceivably burn coal or natural gas and capture it in the electric system. Outside the electric system, all fossil fuel emissions are uncontrolled. Therefore, you got to electrify. You've got to run your car, you've got to run your home heating system on electricity that's within a system that can be decarbonized. Your car itself will never be decarbonized.
Okay, and as always, as we always suggest, art is better than words, and technology is to be try to minimize it because most of the public are just not interested in the details, as both Pam and Matt and we have many times recommended. We did get a question from our audience, and I'm going to take the lead on this, and then I'm going to ask if Pam can add some color. The question was, how many public power utilities have adopted an ESG framework? And by that, I think we're talking about the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, or the Global Reporting Initiative, and a lot of other alphabet soup. And I kid you not. So I reached out to about the dozen largest public power utilities in the country, and here's what I got. One is several seem to be using the greenhouse gas protocol developed by the World Resources Institute, as well as the Climate Registry. So that would be TCR. Some are using both TCR and the Carbon Disclosure Project, as well as, I guess, standards and protocols set by the EPA and their state environmental organization. Another one is using greenhouse gas protocol. Again, that's from the World Resources Institute. One is using the climate registry. So that's more than that. One is using the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. So apparently that organization has set up protocols. And then others are using only the regulatory requirements from the federal or state government. So in this case, that would be EPA and the relevant state organization. And then another one is using, in addition to the EPA and state regs, they are using the Carbon Disclosure Project as well as the Climate Registry. So it looks like the Climate Registry and the greenhouse gas protocols are kind of the winners here in terms of which standards or protocols or frameworks are being used by public power utilities. Now, Pam, can you speak to what your peer investor-owned utilities are using?
Sure. And John, it's a lot of the same. So for Xcel Energy, we follow the protocol of the Climate Registry, and we've done that since 2007. There's other investor-owned utilities that also use the Climate Registry. Many of them use the EPA greenhouse gas reporting protocol for their greenhouse gas reporting, follow that. We were required to do that. And then also, as you mentioned, the World Resource Institute. Those are probably the three most popular. We used to participate in the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we don't anymore, only because the reporting, we do a lot of reporting, but we provide the same information through our sustainability report and other reports that we would have provided under the Carbon Disclosure Project.
So it sounds like the diversity of alphabet soup here shows that the industry is still in a relatively early stage of maturity. And really, it's not just the industry, it's the entire world is still trying to get a handle on what is obviously a moving target. So you've got numerous different protocols from numerous different agencies. Again, speaks to the fact that we're nowhere near something like generally accepted accounting principles. So we have another question, actually it's just come in from Steve. Steve asks, considering the experience with the Vogtle nuclear power plant in Georgia, which is billions of dollars over cost and years late in getting up, and it's not even up yet, how would it be best to discuss the potential for nuclear energy? And this one's got Matt's name on it. Should we segment messaging between traditional and future or small modular reactors? So Matt, you want to take a swing at that, or are we coming up with a second set of messaging for SMRs as opposed to traditional nuclear?
The reactors we have now they've been optimized, they've been honed, they run very well, but it's hard to build more like that. The ones on the drawing board have several advantages. They're engineered more for constructability. They're engineered more to be simpler. They're engineered for flexibility, which the old ones aren't. Some of them are quite substantial departures from existing design. They're designed to run at higher temperature and lower pressure and be easier to build. The American nuclear industry basically followed in the path of the US Navy. They built water-cooled reactors that got larger and larger. Admiral Rickover, the Navy did that not because it was the best design, but because it was the fastest route to deploying submarines to defeat godless communism. Anybody here remember communism? It was a big thing at the time. But it wasn't, it may not be optimal for power production, and making them larger and larger probably is not optimal for the situation the grid now finds itself in. So there's a lot of really creative design work out there, taking advantage of modern materials, modern design techniques. And no, we'd be in trouble if we had to repeat the Vogtle experience over and over. We're going to do things better, do things differently, as all industries do.
And for those of you who have not been closely following the effort by Georgia Power to add 2 new units at the existing Vogel power plant, I think they were originally budgeted at something on the order of 12 to 14 billion with a B. Now it's up to 28 billion with a B and still counting. They're at least a year away from coming online, and really it has validated the points made by critics, many of them, that old nuclear is really a bet the company technology. And the new modular reactors, as they come in much smaller chunks of 40 to 60 megawatts of capacity, much better match load growth patterns than 1,000 megawatts, 1,200 megawatts, which is the old system.
And hopefully not built during a COVID epidemic. There've been a lot of odd curveballs thrown at that project.
Oh yeah, that one is yeah. It looks like I think someone's throwing spitballs, honestly. We do have one more question, and that has come in, and Pam and Matt have graciously agreed to stick around past the top of the hour. If you find you must leave, we do ask you to, when you disconnect, you will get a screen that asks you how we did, how we can do better, and what you'd like to see in future EEC webcasts. And so that would be wonderful if we could get people to tell us what's on their mind and how we can help them. So we did get one more question, and this one maybe, I think I'm going to ask Pam to start with this. It's got a little bit of a political weight behind it. And an attendee asks, are we seeing a return to 1970s, 1980s style of environmental activities that enveloped companies and governments? So I guess this is all around the whole ESG concept or environmental concept. Pam, why don't you start us off?
Sure. You know, I think what we see today is different from that, in that, you know, at least with our customer base or with our stakeholders, we're seeing demand from our customers, our communities. They want clean energy, and that's maybe different than the environmental activism we've seen in the past. You know, we've recently done surveys with our customers that show, you know, 70, 80% of them support clean energy. They also want it to be affordable, but they want clean energy.
Right, and reliable, don't forget reliable.
Yeah, and reliable. Mm-hmm.
Gotta be where then you need it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I would add to that, you know, at the beginning of this presentation, we talked about the assets under management, increasingly people who are responsible for managing pension funds, investment funds, private equity funds, all sorts of investment, mutual funds. They are putting their money into ESG funds or sustainability or environmentally responsible. I think the number is exceeded 100 trillion with a T dollars under management. Now that's 4 times the size of the US economy. So I think this is not some kind of political new wrinkle. And when you start getting investment of that magnitude, and then the credit rating agencies are starting to get in, and even your employees and your future employees, some utilities are starting to use their ESG performance or their environmental performance as a way to connect with future employees. And we know that a lot of companies are having a lot of trouble filling empty spots. So I don't think this is some kind of political fly-by-night. I don't see necessarily Earth Justice chaining themselves to you know, the gates of a power plant anytime soon, which is the kind of thing we saw in the 70s and 80s. So I think it's kind of become mainstream is the term that sounds right to me. Matt, anything to add on that?
Yes, I think that the severity of the next hurricane season, the severity of the next drought will drive public opinion. The severity of the next floods. the world has become a lot more interconnected. You can connect with people whose house has burned, whose house has been flooded. You can see it all live on your computer screen, and that's going to drive public opinion. And it'll be worse around the world, and eventually there'll be some input. We have a international responsibility as historically the world's largest carbon polluters, and there'll be some input from Aunt Matilda out in Denver, had to flee because of a wildfire. And that's going to keep this, I was going to say on the front burner, but I think we got to retire that expression.
And one more thing I would add while we're waiting for other people to ask us questions if they're interested. Black & Veatch, the large construction firm, every year does a survey of stakeholders in the utility industry. So we're talking about executives as well as companies that provide services to utilities. But this is not, a general survey. This is a survey of stakeholders. And interestingly enough, the top issue this year, identified by those some 500 stakeholders that were surveyed, is the ability to integrate renewable energy into the grid. That's the top concern, dislodging for the better part of a decade or even 15 years, longtime concerns by the industry leaders about aging infrastructure. How do we replace it? How do we get the parts? How do we pay for it? How do the regulators let us recover? So that's another interesting point in the energy transition, demonstrating it's sort of here to stay. And the last thing I would add from that survey, and I would recommend people reading it if they want to know kind of what's on the mind of the leaders of this industry. The last point is Black & Veatch asked the respondents to tell us what are the drivers for your embrace of renewable energy, batteries, hydrogen, microgrids, and so on. And while a lot of it was government pressure, government priorities, government funding, that was the top tier. What I found notable was that a doubling or tripling of respondents said, well, it's because of the interest of our stakeholders. It's because of the interest of large commercial and industrial customers, and it's the interest of residential customers. So all of that goes to, I guess, the point of saying this is not something that I think is going away anytime soon. And really, I think I'm not sure if we've gotten any more questions. I certainly would love to have anyone that has any additional questions to send them to us in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen.
I'd like to throw in an idea if
Yes,
the
sir.
floor is open, which is this is a particularly tough time for utilities because utilities don't want to do anything quickly. They have difficulty doing anything quickly. The public does want things done quickly, and we get a few more natural disasters attributed to climate, and there's going to be a lot of clamor for this. It's going to be on the order of the squeeze that utilities got into in trying to meet acid rain provisions back in the 80s, things like that, and that there's competitive advantage to utilities that think ahead. The fact that in the Black & Veatch survey, they're most worried about integration is a reflection of, state legislatures and other bodies passed laws saying you got to be X% renewable by this date, X plus 1% by that date, et cetera. Those things are now coming due. And the physical difficulties of meeting those quotas is becoming much more obvious. So utilities that think through that in advance and try to get set up for it in advance will have a competitive advantage.
Right. The California duck curve, as we've talked about, is, it's when the solar starts to decline in terms of production in the afternoon is exactly when people need it, when they come home from the office, slam on the air conditioning, and suddenly the demand goes way up just at the same time that renewables is going down. So many people are talking about the need for batteries and other technologies to store the renewables or nuclear SMR.
And when your kid says the dog ate my homework, that's a problem. When your utility says the dog ate my homework, that's a societal problem. Or maybe we got to update that too. The supply chain ate my homework.
Right. That's not going to fly. That's going to get
Right.
shredded in the market, and it's going to hurt. Well, we are at the top of our hour, and it does not appear we have any more questions. And in fact, we're starting to see people head for the exits. So with that, I will thank Matt and Pam for terrific conversation today. Thank you so much for answering the attendees' questions. And again, I do want to emphasize, we are here to help you if you have a desire to do an ESG report, an environmental report, a sustainability report, community investment, whatever. We have done those, would be delighted to help you with those and meet the increasing expectations of your customers. So with that, I will thank everyone again and wish everyone the best Wednesday possible.